Happy Sunday! Obviously, we couldn't meet for church this week and probably for the next few weeks. And a lot of churches have been canceled, and of course, probably had vacations and things like that canceled as well. And I'm sure many of us are missing just our regular routine things that we like to do. One of my favorite pastimes is Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. For those who are unfamiliar with Jiu Jitsu, it's a rougher martial art than most. It's essentially submission wrestling. So there's a lot of direct physical contact and interaction. So we can't really practice it without spreading germs. And that's because Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, which is often called BJJ for short, focuses on doing rather than thinking. Where other Eastern martial arts have students kind of shadow boxing through rote routines, BJJ demands that students spar live with some simple rules. There's no hitting, no biting, or small joint manipulation or gouging. The spar is over when one of the two jiu-jitsu players taps out. It says uncle, basically. You can't play Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu if you're unwilling to get smashed by someone else. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is descended from a Japanese art practiced by the samurai of old. It was meant to make the samurai themselves swords when they lost their weapons. Of course, the weapon of a samurai is famously known. It's the katana, or samurai sword. Katanas are known for beauty and craftsmanship, really well outside of martial arts and all of that, and people just know these. I'm sure you've seen a samurai sword and TV show or movie that you've watched. Crafting a samurai sword is, like many Japanese practices, an involved and very artful process. You can't just take a hunk of raw steel, melt it down, pour it into a katana mold, and then call it a day. Swords made that way just break. Instead, the raw metal has to be folded over many times. The process of folding steel, shitakete, can create up to 1 million layers of metal in one blade. And it's necessary because steel fresh off the forge is impure. Folding removes impurities and homogenizes the steel. In feudal Japan, swordsmiths used a steel called tamahagani, which consisted of iron sands and charcoal smelted in a clay furnace. This metal came out of the furnace impure, with gaps, less desirable elements, and an uneven distribution of carbon throughout. Obviously, a warrior wants the strength in a sword to be uniform through the whole blade, rather than have one or several areas with concentrated levels of carbon that create brittle weak points that could lead to the sword breaking on impact. Folding steel and hammering it crush out those impurities. If you think of the iconic image of a hammer striking a hot blade on an anvil and sparks flying, those sparks are little pockets of non-steel liquids squeezed out of the surface by the pressure. My jiu-jitsu coach is actually a blacksmith. He compares the wrestling mats BJJ is played on to an anvil, and one's opponent to the hammer. The school's motto is "Embrace the grind," which is a popular BJJ phrase. By getting smashed by your real opponent, something that is often humiliating, painful, and frustrating, you come out the other side folded, sometimes literally, and better able to face your next opponent, because the impurities in your game have been hammered out in the process of being beaten down. There's an old saying that we all know: what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. We face trials on a daily basis. Some challenges are easy to overcome. Others play to our weaknesses, our vulnerabilities, our sensitivities, or impact those parts of our life that matter most to us, our weak points. A manageable test for one person could be a fiery trial for another, because we have different impurities and weaknesses in us. The Israelites faced a trial in Exodus 17, so I'm going to read that for you. You can follow along at home if you'd like to. At the Lord's command, the whole community of Israel left the wilderness of sin and moved from place to place. Eventually they camped at Rephidim, but there was no water there for the people to drink. So once more the people complained against Moses. "Give us water to drink," they demanded. Hold on a second. There's a few impersonations we're going to have in this message. So we have Moses, right? Charlton Heston. I mean, that's probably who we're going to have as Moses, right? So Moses replied, "Quiet. Why are you complaining against me? And why are you testing the Lord?" But tormented by thirst, the people continued to argue with Moses. "Why did you bring us out of Egypt? Are you trying to kill us, our children, and our livestock with thirst?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What should I do with these people? They are ready to stone me." The Lord said to Moses, "Walk out in front of the people. Take your staff, the one you used when you struck the water of the Nile, and call some of the elders of Israel to join you. I will stand before you on the rock at Mount Sinai. Strike the rock, and water will come gushing out. Then the people will be able to drink." So Moses struck the rock as he was told, and water gushed out as the elders looked on. Moses named the place Massah, which means test, and Meribah, which means arguing, because the people of Israel argued with Moses and tested the Lord by saying, "Is the Lord here with us or not?" Don't know why the Israelites were David Lynch, but that's the voice that they just wanted to have. So there you go. The Israelites showed weakness in hoping rather than believing that God was still with them. Let's just double back on that line. The Israelites showed weakness in hoping rather than believing that God was still with them. A point of impurity that many of us share, bear with me, is hope. Hope can be a very dangerous thing. Think back to the story of the Israelites we just discussed and the greater context around it. We've all been doing our Bible reading. We know Exodus, hopefully. The Israelites fled harsh slave conditions in Egypt, where they were starved, beaten, just treated as subhuman. They fought hard to walk out of Egypt. Full of hope, they left behind a land of oppression, only to then find themselves in a barren desert where the promised land of their own sovereignty seemed far away. Their hope had turned to despair as the object of that hope went unfulfilled, at least in their eyes. Probably not many of you really remember the 2012 Batman film, The Dark Knight Rises. It was kind of a flop. Critics didn't really like it. It was the weakest of Christian Bale's Batman films. However, I kind of liked it. And the villain of the film is named Bane. He has long been one of my favorite Batman villains, even before the film. Bane's goal in comics and film has always been the breaking of Bruce Wayne, not just the overcoming of Batman, but to hammer Bruce Wayne down, the man himself. In a pivotal scene in this movie, Bane has broken Batman's back and has Bruce Wayne holed up in a prison that is known only in legend. And just to circle back, Bane is from South America and a wrestler, so there's still some BJJ in here. So Batman is holed up in this prison. Bane has put him there. Batman's back is broken. Wayne asks Bane where he is, and Bane explains that this is the worst prison in the world. From his bed, unable to rise due to his broken back, Wayne can see a tunnel leading up out of the subterranean prison with sunlight streaming in from above. So Bane notices him looking at him. I said there'd be some impersonations. I like to impersonate Bane. It's a fun voice. So this is Bane right here. That's Batman. You probably knew that, right? So Bane, his voice, so you start with Sean Connery, right? Which is like, "Hello, Miss Moneypenny." But it's Sean Connery after he's had a bit of laryngitis and he's trying to recover from it. But then he's got this mask that kind of gets in his way. So we got to add that piece into the whole puzzle. So we've got a handy dandy Bane mask here. So this is what Bane tells Bruce Wayne about the worst prison in the world. "This is where I learned the truth about despair, as will you. It's hope. Every man who has rotted here over the centuries
has looked up to the light and imagined climbing to freedom. So simple, so easy. And like shipwrecked men turning to seawater from uncontrollable thirst, many have died trying. I learned that there can be no true despair without hope.
LDS elder Neil A. Maxwell has said, "When in situations of stress, we wonder if there is any more in us to give. We can be comforted to know that God, who knows our capacity perfectly, placed us here to succeed. No one was foreordained to fail or to be wicked. When we have been weighed and found wanting, let us remember that we were measured before and we were found equal to our tasks, and therefore let us continue, but with a more determined discipleship. When we feel overwhelmed, let us recall the assurance that God will not overprogram us. He will not press upon us more than we can bear." Architects will tell you that stress is an essential part of any structure. Going back to blacksmithing, now we're into architecture. Structures must be built with give and sway. Without give, an excess of stress in a structure puts it under strain. When the stress points in a structure are strained, the structure becomes damaged. Likewise, once the normal stress of life builds to a certain level, it no longer serves a productive purpose. Our lives become strained and we face the potential of emotional and physical damage. Such strain often occurs when we hope for perfection in our performances, achievements, or success. The truth is, perfection isn't a part of this life. For most of us, the best we can hope for is steady progression. Bruce Wayne succumbs to the temptation of the climb once his back is healed. Going back to Batman here, Bruce does try to get out through this tunnel. He starts the steady trial and error of climbing his way out of the prison. Like all the other prisoners, he wears a rope as he tries to climb, and it's attached to the wall. The rope's there to catch prisoners when they fall trying to do this. And Bruce Wayne falls time and time again, until one climb he realizes what's weighing him down. The thing that's holding him back is the rope. So he climbs without it, makes it out. There can be no pure hope without risk and yielding to strain. A sword can't be forged without being hammered and folded. A warrior can't be built with just shadow boxing alone. God put trials in front of us with the possibility that we could lose. Hope for perfection is despair. Perfection is the province of God's kingdom. Hope for the chance to lose the weaker parts of ourselves. Hope for the chance to get back into the fight and do just a little better than we did the last time. That's true hope. In the LDS Handbook for Families, it says, sometimes the best way to cope with stress is simply to be realistic about what we expect of ourselves and others. We may be trying to do much more than we are capable of doing. Often we become upset because we're not perfect in everything we try. Perfection is our ultimate hope, but in the meantime, we should be realistic and kind in our expectation of ourselves and others. The Israelites faced this same problem in Exodus 17. They'd fled their tormentors in Egypt. That's good. They'd achieved the freedom they so desperately longed for over generations. Another good. They stood as a sovereign nation, if nomadic, with religious freedom and a calling all their own, no longer impinged upon by a society that didn't even accept them. And yet they complained and waited for miracles to achieve a perfect kingdom. The Lord provided them with the miracle of water from a stone. However, this miracle did not lead to perfection. In fact, Exodus 17 is set fairly early in the overall wandering in the wilderness. Thirst and hardship stayed with the Israelites throughout the 40 years in wilderness. And one day their demand that Moses perform that same miracle again would condemn him from entering the Holy Land. We ourselves wander lost in our own wilderness. We see the sun beating down on us and the hardships we face as curses, as ways that hope has been lost and turned to despair, because we think we've been lost to God or that the perfect kingdom we were promised lies outside our reach somewhere. It is in these times that we are being given a much better hope, the hope of becoming better than we were before. If we embrace the grind, allow ourselves to be hammered and sparked, then we fold. Previously, we saw ourselves as whole and perfect, not realizing that all we were was hiding our imperfections. The anvil of life and the hammer of circumstance gives us the hope that we can bend and stretch and come round right. Hope is part of our religion. Mentioned in one of the LDS articles of faith, we follow the admonition of Paul. We believe all things, we hope all things. We have endured many things, and we hope to be able to endure all things. LDS President Russell Nelson once said, "A more excellent hope is mightier than a wistful wish. Hope, fortified by faith and charity, forges a force as strong as steel. Hope becomes an anchor to the soul. To this anchor the faithful can cling, securely tethered to the Lord. Satan, on the other hand, would have us cast away that anchor and drift with the ebb and tide of despair. If we will cling to the anchor of hope, it will be our safeguard forever." Enjoy your Sunday and have a good week. Thank you.